Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome tonight to this qualifying preview for the 2023 Japanese Grand Prix weekend. Hope you guys are well. Of course, I've already been doing plenty of content for this Japanese Grand Prix weekend. We did a watch along of Practice 1 and Practice 2 very early this morning. And the sessions were alright. We got some decent action out there on the track. Thankfully, it did stay dry because it is expected to be a dry day for qualifying and for the race. So I wanted to see, how people were looking. And obviously, if it was wet, then we wouldn't get any idea going into the proper sessions where teams were on pace. But yeah, it was a decent Friday practice day. And yeah, I think we've got a pretty decent idea at least of, especially for the top 3-4 teams, how the pecking order is looking. And of course, in this qualifying preview, that's what we're going to be getting into. The data from Practice 2, the most representative session of the weekend so far. We're looking at the sector time data. I'll be, giving my view on what I think the pecking order for qualifying is, based off what I've seen so far. And then we'll be getting into my final qualifying prediction going into qualifying tomorrow morning. And actually, qualifying starting in, about 11 hours time from now? So it's not actually that far away. And then, of course, we'll get into car upgrades. Ferrari, of course, have got a big floor upgrade. We'll be getting into that and a couple other bits as well. So plenty of stuff we're going to be getting into in tonight's stream. Hope you guys are doing well, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from. Hope you're all having as best a day as possible, and hope, of course, that you'll join me this evening in previewing qualifying. And make sure, of course, in the chat to let me know your thoughts with qualifying as to how you think certain teams and drivers will get on. But yeah, that's what we'll be getting into, of course, in the qualifying preview, the usual stuff. Just trying to think of what else I was wanting to say before we probably get into this. Oh yeah, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat where I've asked you guys who is most likely to challenge Max Verstappen for pole position for tomorrow's qualifying session in Japan. And the options are Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, and Russell, who were the next four drivers after Verstappen in Practice 2. So out of those four, who is most likely to fight Verstappen and, beat Verstappen? Pole position. Let me know in that poll, and you can even let me know in a bit more detail in the live chat as well how you think things will play out. Let's now get into this qualifying preview. And of course, we'll start off with the results of Practice 2. So Max Verstappen, quickest by 0.3 of a second, was very comfortable in the end. A day and a session especially. The Red Bull team, a 1:30.6, a stunning lap time by Max. Charles Leclerc, second, was only slightly away from getting into the 1:30s, but it does show the gulf so far this weekend between Red Bull and really the rest. But yeah, Leclerc looking good, I would say, after Practice 2. At least was quicker than his teammate Carlos Sainz by nearly 1/4 of a second. And then you got Lando Norris in third. Lando was actually very pleased with the pace of the McLaren because, according to him, the McLaren was quite hard to handle in practice. So I think he's very encouraged by them after Practice 2 only being 4.5 tenths off, which is, not too bad considering those issues that are going on there for the McLaren. Carlos Sainz then in 4th place, with George Russell in 5th, and Mercedes looking, I would say, a tad better with their qualifying pace at the minute compared to what I expected coming into the weekend. And that same goes for Aston Martin, with Fernando Alonso ending up in 6th place. I definitely did not expect Aston Martin to be quicker than Williams over a single lap. So yeah, good to see Aston Martin looking a bit better than expected. And then Albon in 7th, Williams still looking competitive. with Piastri 8th in the McLaren. Piastri half a second slower than Lando Norris, which is, yeah, a bit too much lap time to be slower, than your teammate. Of course, Oscar has never raced here before, so it's not going to be a great weekend for him anyway, but yeah, half a second is a bit excessive. And then Sergio Perez in 9th, 1 full second slower than Max Verstappen. That is incredibly poor. In qualifying last year at this track in the dry, Perez was only 0.4 of a second slower than Max Verstappen, which really is maybe you could say it should be slightly better than that, or closer of a gap between Verstappen and Perez, but really that was as close as Perez realistically could get over a single lap compared to Max around this track. But a second slower is embarrassing from Perez. He has to do better tomorrow. And then you got Valtteri Bottas, surprisingly, up in the top 10 for Alfa Romeo, who showed quite a turn of speed in second practice. And then for the bottom half of the field, you've got Lance Stroll in 11th place, Esteban Ocon in 12th, Alpine not quick whatsoever, and then Hülkenberg for Haas in 13th. Haas also not very quick, definitely a surprise there. Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton in 14th place. Hamilton definitely struggling with the balance of the car. Now, we'll get more into that later, but yeah, he's definitely not coping as well with how the car is handling as, say, George Russell is, from what we've seen so far this weekend. He was losing the rear end a couple times, was Hamilton, on his best lap in second practice. Liam Lawson then 15th. AlphaTauri quite a bit slower than I thought they would be. And then you've got Zhou 16th. Zhou very slow compared to teammate Bottas, 0.4 of a second slower. And then Magnussen 17th, Tsunoda 18th, Pierre Gasly down in 19th. Not quite sure why Gasly was so poor in practice too. And then Logan Sargent at the very back of the field, which is, well, not surprising, is it? He's usually been, down there a lot of the time this season. But let's get into the sector time data from practice 2, just to see where certain teams were quick and not so quick. Then the first sector, this is where Red Bull have such an advantage over everyone else. It is the first sector really that is making the difference this weekend from what I've seen so far. They were at least a quarter of a second quicker than the next car, being the McLaren, and then 0.4 of a second quicker in the first sector alone compared to Ferrari. Just incredible, the difference. And I know the first sector, it is very important. It is probably the most important part of the track, but I did not see Red Bull being that much quicker in the first sector compared to Ferrari, even at this stage of the weekend. I thought it would be more like, I don't know, 0.2 of a second at most, but 0.4 of a second is, yeah, just incredible. Alonso in the Aston Martin, his pace actually pretty good through Sector 1. Alfa Romeo, very good in Sector 1. Mercedes definitely could do better. I think they could probably be 0.1/10 at least better. They should be, you'd think, quicker than Aston Martin through the S's. Mercedes do tend to have a better car for fast corners, high-speed corners. So, yeah, definitely I think there is, or there should be, more to come from the Mercedes team. And then you've got the Haas, 7th best, Williams, 8th best, which is not necessarily a massive surprise. I think they probably still should have been better, Williams, but still, it's not a gigantic surprise. And then Alpine, miles off in the first sector, and AlphaTauri even further behind. Yeah, quite incredible that the AlphaTauri nearly a second slower than the Red Bull in Sector 1 alone. And, Sector 1, as you can see, only just over half a minute. Incredible. And then we come to the middle sector. And for the middle sector, what do you call it? Red Bull, nowhere near the quickest team through there. Obviously, the middle sector, you do have a couple important corners. You've got the Degner corners, you've got the hairpin, and as well you've got the spoon curve. But you've also got long sections where you are flat out. And of course, that's why Ferrari had the best pace through there, pretty much 0.2 of a second quicker than both Mercedes and Red Bull. I think this, this data though from practice 2 does indicate that Red Bull definitely, even though they were 1/3 of a second quicker than the next best team, I think they can go a bit quicker than that. And I think this sector time does prove it, because in the middle sector, Red Bull should be basically on the same pace as Ferrari. Even if they're slightly slower, it should only be, a few hundredths of a second. So Red Bull have definitely got more to come. McLaren, 4th best. Not necessarily a surprise, their pace there. Williams got decent pace. Alpine, much better pace. Aston Martin probably should be a bit better in the middle sector by probably 1/10 of a second at most. Alfa Romeo, and then 8th best team, then Haas, which I am surprised they are the 2nd worst team in the middle sector. And AlphaTauri, once again, the absolute lowest. But as you'll see, with these Sector 3 times, Williams the quickest through the final sector, and then Red Bull and Ferrari only slightly slower and pretty much on the same pace. But really, if you're comparing Red Bull and Ferrari, who are quite clearly the 2 quickest teams over a single lap from what we've seen so far, which is not really a surprise. I think most of us knew that was going to be the case anyway coming into the weekend. So the first sector, of course, there's a massive gap, but in Sector 2 and Sector 3, they're pretty close, if not Ferrari are actually quicker. So it's really just Sector 1, which is deciding the battle for pole position right now. And if Ferrari are going to take pole tomorrow, it's all going to come down to the first sector time they do and how close it is to the Red Bull. If they can get, like a tenth and a half away in Sector 1 and then be quicker overall in Sector 2 and Sector 3 combined, then they might just about have enough pace to get pole position. But again, this first sector time being 0.4 of a second off, that's what's deciding it in that battle. But the final sector is pretty simple. You only have to slow down once in the final sector for the final chicane. Williams, no surprise, they're the quickest team through there. I would have expected them to be, at minimum, one of the top 3 best teams. Red Bull and Ferrari quick. Haas quick, no surprise there. Mercedes, pretty decent in the final sector. Alpine, pretty good. I would have expected them to be right at the back, to be honest, in this final sector. McLaren probably could be a bit better in this final sector by a few hundredths of a second. Aston Martin, maybe you could argue as well. And then you got AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo at the very back. But really, even though, Sector 3 to a degree is important, Sector 2 is important to a degree, the first sector really is, I think, what is going to decide, and it normally does decide where, certain teams end up on the grid. And it's a great, sector to really judge how certain teams are looking, going through a race weekend here at Suzuka. But overall, if we go back to the results quickly of practice 2, and I'll just touch on what I think the pecking order is going into qualifying. Red Bull quite clearly have the quickest car for qualifying. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. I think you'd be crazy, to be honest, to say that Ferrari have got probably a better chance going into qualifying tomorrow. Red Bull quickest, Ferrari second, and then you've got McLaren and Mercedes incredibly close, I think, for third. And I know here, McLaren are nearly 0.2 of a second quicker than Mercedes, but you have to remember, Mercedes do tend to be one of the teams on a Friday that are kind of sandbagging more than others. And that's why I think when we get to qualifying, Mercedes will be pretty much on the same pace as McLaren in qualifying, and it'll be a very, very close fight. So McLaren, Mercedes, again, basically I think we'll be on the same pace, 3rd and 4th. And then the 5th best team, I would say Aston Martin, with Williams 6th best, Alfa Romeo 7th best, and then what? Probably Alpine overall 8th best, and then Haas 9th, AlphaTauri being the slowest team from what I've seen so far. I think that is pretty much what the pecking order is going into qualifying tomorrow. Again, for the front 5 teams, I think I'm very likely to be correct, but I could be incorrect with the bottom 5, definitely, with a couple teams. Certainly Alfa Romeo, who might not prove to be that quick, when it really matters. They have disappointed a few times, Alfa Romeo, from practice. But let's, now given you what I think the pecking order will be going into, qualifying tomorrow, let's now get into my predictions for qualifying coming up very soon. So I think Max Verstappen will very comfortably take pole position, and the predicted gap I have gone for ahead of Charles Leclerc, who I think will start alongside him for the race on Sunday on the front row. The gap in favour of Verstappen will be half a second. That is how quick the Red Bull will be in comparison to the Ferrari. And then I've got Carlos Sainz in 3rd, with George Russell just about in 4th place ahead of Lando Norris in 5th. Russell lately has been incredibly quick in qualifying in the last 3 races before this weekend, so that's why I've got Russell just ahead of Norris. But really, it's going to come down to the drivers as to who wins that battle between Russell and Norris, I think, in qualifying. And then I've got Lewis Hamilton in 6th place behind Lando. Perez in 7th. I don't think we're going to see really that much of an improvement from Perez in qualifying. And then Alonso just behind in 8th, with Oscar Piastri 9th, and then Alexander Albon rounding out the top 10 for the Williams team. So that is my prediction going into qualifying. Let me know in the chat what your thoughts are as to what the top 5 will be, what the top 10 will be. And of course, let me know, who do you think will get pole position for the 2023 Japanese Grand Prix? And so I'll just go back to these pictures for a moment, because we are now going to get into car upgrades. There's not too much to get into in regards to this, but we will touch on it as we do every weekend anyway. So let me just quickly on my end get it up. In terms of the confirmed list of upgrades, and then we'll show off a couple pictures as well, just to show the upgrades for real. So, right, here we go. Let me actually just get a bit bigger on my end. Right, so here is the confirmed list of upgrades. So starting at Ferrari, they have a new floor body. And it says revision of front floor fences, floor edge, mid-floor and diffuser sidewall, side pod undercut redesigned to suit. We will show those off in a moment. For Mercedes, you've got a slightly new rear wing. Says vane added to outer face of rear wing end plate. I have seen a picture of that. We'll show that in a moment as well. It's a very minor upgrade for Mercedes, but a bit of a bigger one from Ferrari. For McLaren, they've got a new side pod inlet and side pod inlet packer, it says. A very small little update there for the Macca team. And then Aston Martin have got a new front corner, but that is circuit specific. And then for AlphaTauri, a couple performance upgrades. One for the rear wing. Relative to the previous geometry, the rear wing end plate junction with the rear wing elements has been updated. And also have a new rear view mirror. And this is for drag reduction. It says, compared to the baseline rear view mirror assembly, 3 turning vanes have been removed from the outboard mirror stem. And it does say, in this part, the brief description on how the update works, it does say tested and raced at R15, which would be race 15. And race 15, I'm pretty sure, was last week in Singapore. So clearly, they've liked how it worked and have put it on permanently for the car. And then the final one you have is Williams. New floor fences, and it says the height of the most inboard forward floor fence is reduced. You can see here on the diagram where that floor fence upgrade is. It's just around the driver and around the halo as well. So not really that many upgrades for this race. Again, a couple small ones for Mercedes, AlphaTauri, Williams, but the biggest one by far is for Ferrari. And here are some pictures, I believe, of the new floor. So on the top here, you can see this is the old floor, yes, Singapore, and then on the bottom is the new one, and you can see a different shape and design to this area. And also here, at the back of the floor, you can see on the top here the Singapore one, and on the bottom the new one. And again, just a slight redesign to the shape of the end of the floor. It's not a massive upgrade, but it is, of course, the most important part of the car. And then here is just the side pod of the Ferrari. And I don't think we've seen anything so far to suggest that their pace really has improved from this upgrade. So I don't think we can really sit here and say, yeah, Ferrari are definitely a lot quicker. Red Bull, though, I do think now they've put their new floor upgrade that they brought to Singapore, now that they've put that back on the car, I do think that is helping Red Bull be as quick as they've been so far this weekend. And here is the new rear wing end plate update for Mercedes. So you can see here on the left the difference from the rear wing on the right, this slight edge of the end plate, and the difference to the one on the right. So yeah, there you go. And I don't think there is any more upgrades in terms of the pictures I'll be able to show you guys. So there you go. Yeah, nothing absolutely massive for loads of teams like we saw back in Singapore. But yeah, the main upgrade to look out for this weekend in terms of how it will perform is the slightly new floor for the Ferrari team, which hopefully can give them an extra quarter of a second. We'll have to see ultimately qualifying how it has worked for the team. But let's now get into some of the top teams and go into a bit more detail as to how they're looking going into qualifying. So of course we will start with Red Bull Racing, and Red Bull are looking actually pretty good going into qualifying. I mean, coming into the weekend, I thought they would be quick, no doubt about it, but I did not think they would be this dominant compared to the rest of the teams after just Friday practice. I thought it would still be close between Red Bull and Ferrari, so for them to be this far clear after the first two practice sessions is very ominous, because we know on a Friday they don't tend to be that quick a lot of the time. Even if they're the quickest, the gap tends to be quite short. But yeah, here in Japan they've already got a comfortable gap, which is definitely not a good omen for the rest of the teams. And yeah, they have put back on for both cars the new floor they brought in Singapore. They did do a test in practice one in terms of floor comparisons. They had Max Verstappen running the new floor and Sergio Perez running the old one. And this is according to Formula Data Analysis, who has a brilliant Twitter account. Make sure to go and check that out if you do have Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. They presented the data in a tweet that Verstappen, with the new floor in practice one through turn 6, had, I think it was 10 kilometers an hour more speed through the corner compared to Perez with the old floor. So if that is indeed all true, which I believe it is, then yeah, the new floor clearly has worked quite a bit for Red Bull and has given them an extra probably 2-3 tenths of a second. And that is why they are not going to be stopped this weekend. Max Verstappen, I think, easily gets pole position by half a second. In regards, though, to Sergio Perez, yeah, a second off in practice 2. That is nowhere near good enough. He needs to be a lot closer than that. If he can try and get within half a second, then he probably will be in the top 3 on the grid, I think, given how quick Max is likely to be in qualifying. But yeah, a second a lap is just too much lap time. Way, way, way too much lap time to be behind another driver. I don't care how great Max is. He has to be Perez a lot closer than that. But for Max Verstappen and Red Bull, yeah, they're going to dominate the weekend, and it is going to take something quite incredible to stop Red Bull and Max Verstappen. And let's now go into the rest of the teams, because with Red Bull, yeah, there's not really that much to talk about because they're now just back to their normal performance level. And in fact, I would say their performance advantage over the rest is now bigger than it was probably before the Singapore Grand Prix. So yeah, it is not looking good for the competition. Let's get into Mercedes-Benz. Pace pretty decent so far. George Russell in the top 5 in practice too. Didn't expect that. I thought he may have been 2 or 3 positions lower than that in the end. But yeah, he did a good lap. I mean, he was what? Was it 6 tenths of a second or 6.5 tenths behind Verstappen? Given, how much quicker the Red Bull is compared to the Mercedes, that's not really that bad, to be honest. So yeah, I can't really complain. With that 6.5 tenth gap, though, almost all of that is being lost in the first sector. So at least for Mercedes, it's not, they're not losing 2 or 3 tenths per sector to Red Bull. It's just one sector, but still, it is quite a loss of lap time through, half a minute around track. And they'll have to improve on that tomorrow, even if they're just to beat, say McLaren in qualifying, never mind the Ferrari team. But yeah, for Mercedes, I think things look good. Russell, I have predicted qualifying 4th because of his good form in qualifying as of late. And the Mercedes car does look pretty decent so far. For his teammate Lewis Hamilton, though, yeah, he is definitely struggling once again. The balance of the car. He was half a second slower than Russell in practice 2. And that was despite Hamilton doing his flying lap last out of anybody else. So he had, access to more rubber on the track that would have, made the track more grippery, and, would have made, grippery? What the hell was I saying then? Grippy. That's what I meant to say. Grippery. I don't even know what I was trying to say there. You get what I mean. There was more rubber on the track for when he did his lap, and yeah, it was just it wasn't a great lap. He lost the rear end of the car a few times, and just didn't look that comfortable with the car. Nowhere near as comfortable as George Russell has looked. As Russell, even though of course had his accident in Singapore, looks like he is back to his absolute best, which is great to see. But yeah, I've gone 4th for Russell, 6th for Hamilton. And if they were to get that in qualifying, that would be, I think, a pretty good result, given that Red Bull and Ferrari are pretty clearly the 2 fastest teams over a single lap. And it would give them, I think, a very good chance of finishing on the podium on Sunday if they were to end up with that result. So, yeah, if I'm a Mercedes fan, I wouldn't be super pumped up for this race weekend, but I'd definitely be looking forward to it because I think there's definitely going to be some real positives coming out of this weekend, and it will be a bit more of a fun weekend than some other Grand Prix weekends have been in 2023 for the Silver Arrows. let's now go into the Ferrari team. And yeah, this new floor upgrade, which again, it's not a massive upgrade for the team. It's not, it's not as big as the McLaren floor side pod upgrade that we saw back in Austria a couple months ago, but it should improve the speed of the car. But unfortunately, we have not seen any performance gains so far. They look, I wouldn't say just as quick as I expected without the upgrade, the advantage given from the upgrade if there was any, but they don't look quicker with the upgrade. They just don't look quicker so far. Now, of course, they've only had 1 day on track with the new floor, so maybe they'll be able to unlock more potential from it tomorrow. But yeah, I think I don't think it's improved the car from what I can see. But ultimately, of course, we will find out tomorrow in qualifying. Leclerc and Sainz, I will admit, I think probably a bit ambitious on my end to predict Leclerc to be not just ahead of Sainz, but 0.2 per second clear of Carlos in qualifying. But really, I'm basing that off of what we saw in practice 2. Of course, though, Sainz in practice 1, I think was 0.3 of a second quicker than Leclerc. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which Ferrari driver ends out, ahead. But as long as both drivers do the maximum lap they can, then yeah, second and third on the grid is what they'll get, unless Sergio Perez finally, gets back into form. But yeah, it should be second and third on the grid, which is exactly the positions they had last year. Last year, of course, they were very close to pole position. Maybe even could have got a front row lockout if they just had a slight bit more pace, but yeah, that is not possible. And really, Ferrari, I think, are just looking to, secure good track position for the race. But really, I think, finishing on the podium for Sunday is what the aim has got to be now, because I think it's already pretty clear that Red Bull are just a step ahead of the rest. So yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, yeah, you're not going to be as good as you were in Singapore. That is for sure. But maybe if they can unlock more potential from the new floor, they'll be able to get a bit closer and give Red Bull a bit of a scare in quali. Aston Martin will now go on to, yeah, a bit quicker than I thought they would be. Alonso up in 6th place, and quicker Aston Martin proved to be than Williams. And not only in practice 2, but they were quicker than Williams in practice 1 as well. So yeah, I'm not super happy with them. I mean, 5th best team going into qualifying is not exactly great, considering where they were at the start of the year. But yeah, it's looking all right, let's say, going into qualifying. And I think definitely Fernando Alonso will be now top 10 in qualifying. I think I went with, 8th place, which wouldn't be that bad, given, this type of circuit and how the Aston Martin should go around this type of track. Yeah, I don't really have a big issue with that if that's where they end up. Lance Stroll is probably going to end up outside of the top 10 and probably in, 12th or 13th place. I think realistically that's the best you'll see from him. But can Stroll actually make it out of Q1? The last time he made it into Q2 was back at the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, I believe. So yeah, he needs to step up, just Stroll, after that accident, especially in Singapore last week. Yeah, looking okay, Aston Martin, but still, pace not really enough to be fighting Mercedes, McLaren, or obviously Ferrari, Red Bull. And when I say not enough pace to be fighting McLaren, I know I've predicted Alonso to be ahead of Piastri, but that's more so down to Piastri not having the experience around Suzuka, rather than the Aston Martin being on similar pace to the McLaren. I just don't think it would be. I think if Oscar did have previous experience around Suzuka, then I think Piastri would be definitely ahead of Alonso on the grid. But yeah, talking of Piastri, let's get into the McLaren team now. And yeah, pace looks about what I expected compared to Red Bull and Ferrari. I didn't think they would be on the same level as those two teams. Lando Norris in the end did pretty well to end up third in practice 2. So yeah, can't really complain. And Lando, yeah, he said that what do you call it? He said that the car didn't feel that great in practice, and he was pleasantly surprised with how close they were in the end to Verstappen and how high up they were as well in second practice. So yeah, McLaren look good, but not great, because Mercedes are looking a bit stronger than expected, Aston Martin as well. Overall, I don't think they're going to be heading for as good of a result from this qualifying session tomorrow as maybe what I expected coming into the weekend, which is why I have gone Lando Norris just about in 5th, but again, it is going to come down really to the performance of Norris and Russell as to who ends up ahead, in my view. And then Oscar Piastri, because he's struggling a bit more for justifiable reason, I think he'll end up 9th on the grid, which is not necessarily that bad of not necessarily that bad of a place to be for the race. And looking at the long runs from FP2, McLaren looks like they've got a pretty decent car that Piastri would be able probably to make progress on that 9th place on Sunday. So, and thankfully Piastri now of course has the updated McLaren. With the sorry, with the updated McLaren though, still, I don't think we've seen any evidence that it has actually made the car better. I just don't think that evidence is there still. So that is still disappointing to see. But I don't know. Maybe the potential quite hasn't been, realised yet. We'll see going forward for the next few races. But yeah, McLaren look good, but they're definitely not going to be fighting with Red Bull and Ferrari. That is pretty clear to see, unless Lando Norris pulls out an absolute stonker of a qualifying lap. But before we go on to the midfield teams, guys, I'm going to come to you in the live chat to read your comments, so make sure to keep them coming, and I'll get to them in a moment. Just a quick update, though, as to my next 2 pieces of content. So, in a few hours' time, I will be live at 3:15 a.m. UK time for the Practice 3 and qualifying watch-along. Live, yeah, from 3:15 until 8:30 a.m. Going to be a mammoth stream qualifying, which cannot wait to see what happens. And then on Sunday, I'll be live from 4 a.m. UK time for the race preview and the race watch-along. Of course, the race starts at 6 a.m. here in the UK. And then on Monday night, I'll be doing a weekend review at 8 p.m. UK time. So still, after this stream, plenty of stuff coming your way in terms of hours of content and all of that stuff. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. If you want to keep bang up to date with everything going on during the Japanese Grand Prix weekend and, well, during any race weekend, to be honest, because we do watch-alongs, previews, reviews, all of that stuff. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell, of course. And for everybody watching right now, smash that like button. We are currently on 14 likes, so we've got nearly 60 people watching, so I know we can get a bit more than that. Let's try and get 25 plus likes if we can on this stream in the next, 20, 30 minutes or so. Of course, hit the like button. It does help the channel and the algorithm. Also helps me see that you guys actually like the content. But right, let's have a look at your comments. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you. Patrick says Ferrari has the best car. Yeah, definitely not. McLaren F1 races, I'm expecting a revenge Max Verstappen qualifying. And McLaren also saying he thinks it'd be Max, Charles, Lando. And Aline, good to see you, says Max, Lando, Charles for their top 3. Regard says, I mean, pretty much the only prediction I have is Red Bull will win the title this weekend, probably. I still think, even with their pace advantage, I don't think they'll be able to score enough points to actually get it done. But, I mean, yeah, mathematically is all possible. We've got a couple of people having a chat in the chat. Looney Classics says Lewis is not struggling. He is just not pushing his car because he's worried about global warming. Yeah, I think I'll leave that comment at that. Yeah, Hamilton definitely struggling. Regard says hell, Stroll hasn't finished higher than 9th since Spain, with the exception of the Austria sprint, by the way. Yeah, it's been such a poor season for Stroll. He had a good race in Bahrain, where he was 6th, Bahrain, and then he was having a good race in Saudi Arabia, and then he broke down. Nothing he could do about that. He was 5th in Australia, and then we had I think we had a 4-week break after that, didn't we? And then we came to Baku, and then since then he has just been terrible. And yeah, the only couple decent performances he had was 6th in Spain, and I think 4th in the Austrian sprint race. But other than that, he's been terrible. And Lance, I don't think, has scored a point since the Belgian Grand Prix, which was end of July, and he finished in, where did he finish? Was it 9th place? Yeah, it was 9th place. Yeah, unbelievably terrible season, no doubt about that. McLaren from Race says we'll try and be up for Q3, Tazza, but we'll defo beat up Wally. Yeah, I mean, obviously, don't destroy yourself trying to get up for qualifying. I know it is hard for people who aren't used to waking up, being up at those times, watching sport and all, like what East have to contend with if they want to watch European or American sport. But yeah, it's I'm not expecting that many people to be. I think, given what we've seen in practice so far, I'm not expecting that many people to be breaking their necks to watch qualifying necessarily. But you never know what could happen. Let's find a couple more comments if I can. Josh says Red Bull back on top. If there's anything else, I don't think there is. McLaren saying we are spoiled with our times. Yeah, it's a European it's the European series at the end of the day, isn't it? So definitely well favoured in that regard. And I mean, there is lots of privileges to being in Europe, because I mean, when it comes to sports and watching, consuming sport, a lot of it is friendly for Europeans on time. So yeah, it's we're very much privileged when it comes to that. I mean, with Nib, for example, who will be on, of course, on Sunday, because it's it'd be like middle of the afternoon for him. What do you call it? I mean, for him, obviously he's a Liverpool fan and he watches loads of football, loads of other sports, well, tennis and other things. And his sleeping pattern for where he lives is probably, psychotic, really. Because I mean, a lot of the Liverpool games will kick off, either late in the evening or even very early hours of the morning. So yeah, I can't imagine watching, sorry, I can't imagine watching F3, or not F3, but most F1 race weekends at, middle of the night or late at night. I don't think I could ever imagine what that is even like, to be honest. Again, as Europeans, we have to suffer it a couple of times, but we are very much privileged when it comes to that. We will have to get used to it, though, because there is another early morning race coming in a couple of months' time. The Las Vegas Grand Prix in 2 months. The race starts at 6 a.m. and it'll be starting at, 10 p.m. local time in Vegas. So, yeah, we'll have that to contend with. And next year on the calendar, you've got Australia, Japan, and China in a row. And obviously all of them are early morning races. So we will have to get used to it for the next season, especially. But I think after all of those early morning races are done, except for Vegas at the end of the year, then those are pretty much all out of the way. Thankful. But yeah. Thankfully, only have to do it, 2-3 times a year to be able to watch a certain sport. For example, I'm quite thankful that because I'm a big football fan, I'm quite thankful that the World Cup has not been held in Asia, Australia in terms of time, because it would absolutely kill me. That all of the timings of the games. For example, we had, was it the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan? I mean, I was 4 years old then. I think I can remember maybe one of the games at the time, but yeah, I can't. I even though my sleeping pattern is, normally, ideally, wake up very late in the afternoon and go bed at like 6-7 a.m. It still would be weird, watching all of those, games in the middle of the night. And I guess we will have to contend with that to a degree for the next World Cup, which is in USA, Mexico, and Canada. But yeah, point is, us Europeans are very privileged when it comes to that, and when it comes to other things as well. Anyway, let's now whip around the rest of the teams, and then we'll come to the end of this stream. Been quite a quick stream, to be honest. It's really whizzed by. Feels like I've only been live for like 20 minutes. But yeah, let's go into the final few teams. So Alpine, yeah, as you can see here, not a great day. This crash, by the way, in practice too, that what do you call it, Pierre Gasly had. You might remember if you watched it, if anyone watching now watched my practice 2 watch along, I decided to end the stream early because there was a few minutes to go in practice 2, and I thought, yeah, there's nothing else that's going to happen because they're just doing the race runs now, and that's basically the end of the session. I cut the stream off, and then literally 90 seconds later, Gasly crashes at the second Degner. So cheers, Pierre. Yeah, I mean, the crash, obviously not good. It's just, another typical mistake in this part of the track. There's so many drivers that have crashed at the Degner, so I can't really go in too hard on Gasly. Clear driver error. Yeah, not great. But Alpine, not looking very good at all, which is not a surprise. I didn't think coming into this weekend they would be quick. I thought they'd be one of the slowest teams this weekend, and they do look a tad better than that. They're not, as slow looking as Haas and AlphaTauri from what I've seen so far, but still, it doesn't look good. I don't see a top 10 in that car this weekend. I just don't see it at all. I think most likely they're going to be fighting outside of the top 10 and relying this weekend on luck, mistakes from others to be able to get into the top 10 for qualifying and obviously race on Sunday as well. So yeah, for Alpine, no real hope. Maybe at best they could get both cars into into Q2, but they're not getting into Q3. Absolutely no chance of that. A team, though, that will be, at least with one car getting into Q3, is Williams. And yeah, even though they're not maybe as quick as I probably expected coming into the weekend, their pace is still good. Albon was in the top 10, I think, in both practice sessions Friday, or Friday morning for us. And yeah, the pace was still good. He was only just behind Fernando Alonso, not like Alonso was, massively quicker. It was only, was it a few hundredths of a second? I think half a tenth in it between Alonso and Albon. So yeah, it's not like it was 3 or 4 tenths of a second between the two teams. So still looking good. As long as Alex Albon performs for the level he's been performing at this year, then I think Albon will get into the top 10 at the very least. And my prediction is 10th, but I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if he was, say, 8th on the grid. Wouldn't necessarily be shocked by that. I would be shocked, though, if he was to get onto, say, the 3rd row of the grid. Obviously, it would be a top 6. That would be something quite interesting. Qualifying if we do that. Logan Sargent, not looking quick. He was, 7 tenths of a second slower than Albon in practice 2. Once again, miles off, as he's been all, through 2023. And yeah, I think Logan will be knocked out in Q1. Maybe not necessarily last in Q1, but he'll be knocked out in Q1. I have no real doubt about that. But yeah, Williams overall still looking competitive and looking like they're going to be having a decent weekend. As now we'll go into Haas F1. Yeah, surprised at Haas, not as quick as I expected. Coming into the weekend, I actually predicted that they would get a car into Q3, but I don't think that's possible. They've got, from the looks of it, one of the slowest cars. And I think simply they just don't have the downforce compared to other teams, especially in Sector 1. So, yeah, they're just not, they just don't have enough grip, which hopefully that problem will be solved to a degree in a couple races' time at the US Grand Prix, which is in, a month from now, where they're bringing apparently a B-spec car, completely new car, that will be very similar looking, we hear, to the Red Bull. Let's hope that can be, a massive improvement for Haas. But yeah, they just simply don't have the downforce levels of other teams, and that's why they are heading for probably a bit of a poor showing compared to most showings in qualifying 2023. Hulkenberg, I think, will be ahead of Magnussen. But yeah, I think they probably have one car eliminated in Q1, then one car decently, I guess, into Q2. And then the final two teams. Firstly, we've got Alfa Romeo, pretty decent pace, very good pace, especially in the first sector. Not quite as good in the next two sectors, but yeah, downforce-wise, they look pretty good. Valtteri Bottas in the top 10. We know Valtteri is normally pretty competitive here at Suzuka. Did win here 4 years ago. Brilliant race win where he absolutely dominated the race for Mercedes. Was arguably his best race win of his career here at Suzuka. In fact, I would say it was best race win of career. So yeah, brilliant job by Valtteri in practice, getting into the top 10. Massively quicker than Zhou Guan Yu. And yeah, Alfa Romeo look pretty decent. And I think after the top 6 teams of Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Williams, I think Alfa Romeo, out of the final 4 teams, are probably best of the rest. Will be close, though, to a degree, with Haas and obviously AlphaTauri and Alpine. But I think, from what I've seen so far, Alfa Romeo probably have one of the better chances of causing a surprise in qualifying in a few hours' time. So, yeah, looking pretty decent. We'll see if they can deliver good pace. And finally, we have AlphaTauri, who look pretty comfortably the slowest team, which is not what I expected. I thought they'd be a dark horse this weekend. And after practice one, they looked really quick. But yeah, they had no pace in the second practice session. Before, though, I go any further on them, let me just quickly go back and look at the lap time they did. So they did a 1:32.1, I believe. And that was how much quicker? About 0.3 of a second better than their practice one time. So I am just getting a feeling with them. Maybe they weren't pushing as hard as they could have done in that session. And maybe there is a bit more pace in reserve from AlphaTauri. Maybe the drivers just didn't get the laps right. We'll have to see in qualifying. But yeah, from what I've seen so far, I don't think they're making Q3, and I don't think they'll be anywhere near. But let's hope they can surprise me. But hold on, let me go on to the back to the normal pictures. And guys, that is it for this qualifying preview. So let's get into let's get into this poll and the results of the poll in the chat. So I asked you guys, who is most likely to fight Max Verstappen for pole position 2023 Japanese Grand Prix? 66 votes in total, and with 40% of the vote, Charles Leclerc has won it, from Norris second, Sainz third, and Russell quite far down in fourth. So yeah, I agree. I think Leclerc is the most likely to fight Max for pole. We'll see ultimately in a few hours' time. So I will be live, guys, in 6 hours and 15 minutes time for the practice 3 and qualifying watch along live. Yeah, 3:15 a.m. UK time, just over 6 hours from now. And I'll be live just over 5 hours, all the way through until 8:30 in the morning. And then I'll be live on Sunday, live at 4 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts. For the race preview and race watch along, I'll be joined, of course, by Nib for that one. Then on Monday night will be the weekend review. Make sure to come on to all that content if you can. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content before you go. And before you go as well, guys, make sure to smash that like button. 27 likes we're on. Let's try and get over 30 if we can by the end of this stream. And another thing to quickly mention is, of course, if you want to keep up to date with this channel, you can, if you have Twitter, follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Keep up to date with what I'm doing. And make sure to join my Discord server, link below in the description for more content like this. But guys, until my practice 3 and qualifying watch along stream at 3:15 a.m. UK time, which, yeah, 6 hours and 15 minutes from now. Until then, guys, it's been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.